The first time I held her, I thought God had finally forgiven me. Her skin was as soft as the first bloom of spring after a cruel winter, and her tiny fingers wrapped around mine like she already knew I would never let go. I remember whispering her name, Lila, as if saying it too loud would wake me from the most precious dream of my life. For 30 years, I had prayed for that moment. 30 long years of miscarriages, of silent dinners, of neighbors' pitying glances. But that night, when I looked into her little brown eyes, I thought my pain had ended. I was wrong. Lila grew up, loved, too loved, some would say. I couldn't help it. Every scrape on her knee felt like a wound on my own skin. Every fever, every tear, I would trade places with her in a heartbeat. My husband, Richard, used to tease me about it. "You're smothering her, May," he'd laugh, pouring himself another drink. "Let the girl breathe." But I didn't care. She was my heart walking outside my body. Our house was small but warm. Every wall carried her laughter. Every room smelled like the lavender soap I used for her baths. I made up stories for her before bed about princesses who conquered grief and mothers who protected their daughters from all the world's cruelty. She'd fall asleep before the ending, always asking me to save the last part for tomorrow. I never knew how true those stories would become. When Lila turned 10, something shifted. Not in her, she was still the same sweet, curious girl, but in the people around us. My sister, Eleanor, started visiting more often, always bringing gifts that felt too extravagant. Gold chains, expensive dresses. Lila adored her. Aunt Ellie. But I noticed how Eleanor's eyes lingered too long on her face, how her smile sometimes trembled as if holding back words she dared not say. One afternoon, I caught them in the garden. Eleanor was brushing Lila's hair, humming that old lullaby our mother used to sing to us. I watched from the kitchen window, my heart swelling, until I heard Eleanor whisper, "You look just like her." "Like who?" Lila asked, giggling. Eleanor's eyes darted toward the house. "No one, sweetheart, no one." I didn't sleep that night. That small, innocent exchange burned into my mind. What did she mean by just like her? Who was her? Weeks passed, and more strange things followed. One evening, I found an envelope tucked between the pages of Lila's storybook. It had no name, just my handwriting on the front, the same curvy letters I'd used since school. Inside was a photograph, old and faded. A baby, wrapped in the same pink blanket Lila came home in. Only this time, the woman holding her wasn't me. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. The woman in the picture looked familiar, too familiar. Her eyes, they were Eleanor's. I confronted her the next morning. I still remember the way she looked at me when I showed her the photo. Not surprised, not defensive, just tired. "Where did you find that?" she asked quietly. "In Lila's book," I said. "Why is your face in it?" Eleanor sat down, rubbing her temples. "May, maybe you should let this go." "Let this go?" I snapped. "That's my daughter." She looked up, her eyes glistening. "Is she?" The words hit me like a slap. My chest tightened. "What are you saying, Ellie, that she's yours? You can't—" "I'm not saying anything," she interrupted, her voice breaking. Just stop digging, please. I stood there, trembling. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to shake the truth out of her, but she left before I could. That night, Richard came home later than usual. I told him about the photograph, about Eleanor's words. He just stared into his glass of whiskey and muttered, "You always overthink things." "Don't you see what's happening?" I begged. "She's hiding something." But he wouldn't even look at me. And that silence was worse than denial. After that, little things began to unravel. Lila would mention spending time with Eleanor when I wasn't aware of any visit. Once, she said, "Aunt Ellie said you and she used to fight about me when I was a baby." My heart nearly stopped. "Fight? What fight, honey?" Lila shrugged. "She said you cried a lot back then. I couldn't breathe." I had cried, yes, but not from guilt, from joy, from gratitude. Had that been a lie, too? I tried asking Richard again, but he avoided the topic entirely. He started sleeping in the study. I could hear him pacing at night, whispering on the phone when he thought I was asleep. I didn't know it then, but those whispers were the sound of my life falling apart. One evening, as I tucked Lila into bed, she looked up and asked, "Mama, why don't I look like you?" I froze mid-motion. My heart felt like it had stopped. "What do you mean?" I whispered. "Well," she said, holding up an old picture, "Aunt Ellie said I have her eyes, and Daddy said I have her smile." The room spun. I managed a shaky smile and said, "You look like yourself, sweetheart, and that's perfect." But inside, something shattered. That night, I went through every drawer, every cabinet, searching for answers I didn't even know how to find. Finally, tucked behind old tax papers in Richard's desk, I found another envelope. Inside, another photograph, this one clear as day. A hospital room, a newborn in Eleanor's arms, Richard beside her, both smiling. The caption on the back read, "Our Little Miracle, July 3rd, 1985. That was Lila's birthday. I dropped the picture. My knees gave out. The truth had been sitting in my home all these years, wrapped in family smiles and polite lies. When Richard came in and saw me on the floor, holding that photo, he didn't even look shocked. He just sighed, poured another drink, and said, "I told her you'd find out eventually." My voice cracked. "You knew?" He didn't answer. And in that silence, I realized everyone knew. Everyone but me. Lila's laughter echoed from her room, oblivious. My precious girl. The child I had loved with every beat of my heart. The child I had prayed for, begged for, built my life around, was never mine. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph, Eleanor's face, glowing with joy, Richard's arm around her, and the baby that was supposed to be mine. The hours dragged by, each second heavier than the last. I sat in the dark with that picture on my lap, rocking back and forth, whispering to myself that there had to be some explanation, something that made sense, something that didn't tear my entire life apart. But no matter how I twisted it, every piece of the puzzle screamed the same truth. When the sun finally rose, I felt decades older. My reflection in the window was that of a stranger, gray hair wild, eyes hollow, a face drained of every trace of certainty. By breakfast, Richard was gone. He'd left early, as usual, leaving his half-finished coffee and that faint smell of guilt that clung to his shirts. I sat across from Lila as she ate her toast, chattering about a school project, and my hands trembled so much I could barely hold my cup. "Are you okay, Mama?" she asked, tilting her head. I forced a smile. "Of course, sweetheart," but my voice cracked halfway through. After she left for school, I called Eleanor. No answer. I called again and again. Finally, by the 10th try, she picked up. Her tone was weary, almost defeated. "May, please don't what?" I snapped. "Don't ask why my husband is in a photo holding your baby on my daughter's birthday. Don't ask what kind of twisted secret you've kept from me for 10 years. There was silence. I could hear her breathing, slow and uneven. Then she said quietly, "Come to the old farmhouse. I'll tell you everything." The old farmhouse, our parents' house, abandoned for years, creaking under the weight of time and memories. My stomach turned, but I went. The road was long and silent, lined with dead leaves and guilt. When I pulled up, Eleanor was already there, standing on the porch in her gray shawl. For a moment, she looked so much like our mother it made my chest ache. She didn't greet me. She just gestured for me to follow her inside. Dust hung in the sunlight, dancing over the furniture covered in sheets. It smelled like the past old wood, dried flowers, regret. We sat opposite each other at the kitchen table, just like when we were kids. Only now, there was an ocean between us. "Tell me the truth," I said, my voice low but trembling. "All of it." Eleanor looked down at her hands. "You were so sick back then, May. The doctors said you couldn't carry a child again. You remember that?" Of course I remembered. The night the doctor told me, I'd cried so hard I thought my ribs would crack. Richard had held me, whispering that we'd find another way, that love was enough. "Yes," I said bitterly. "I remember." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I was 3 months pregnant. I didn't plan it. I didn't even want the baby at first. But Richard, he said we could fix everything. He said you'd never have to know. The air left my lungs." "He what?" She nodded, shaking. "He said he couldn't watch you break anymore. He said the only way to keep you alive was to give you what you wanted most. So we—" She stopped, covering her mouth. "You what?" I hissed. Her eyes met mine, full of guilt and sorrow. "We gave her to you, May. We made it look like an adoption. The hospital records. Richard took care of it. You never saw the truth because we didn't want to hurt you." I laughed, an awful, broken sound that filled the empty room. "You didn't want to hurt me. You lied to me for 10 years. You let me raise your child while pretending she was mine. How could you?" Eleanor reached across the table, but I pulled away. "You have to understand, May," she pleaded. "I wasn't strong enough. I didn't have money. I didn't have a husband. I didn't have anything. And you wanted that baby so badly. Richard said it would be our secret. I thought it was mercy." "Mercy?" I spat. "Mercy would have been honesty." She began to cry, shaking, whispering how sorry she was. But I couldn't listen. My ears rang with every word she'd said. Richard and Eleanor, my husband and my sister, a betrayal so deep it sliced through every memory I'd ever trusted. I stumbled out of the farmhouse, clutching my chest. The sky spun above me, the ground cold under my knees. I screamed until my throat burned. When I got home, Richard was waiting in the living room, holding his drink like a shield. He looked at me, eyes dull and tired. "So she told you. I wanted to hit him, to hurt him the way he had destroyed me." But all I could do was whisper, "Why?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Because you were dying inside, May. You couldn't eat, couldn't smile. I thought if she gave you the baby, you'd live again. And you did. You were happy." "Happy?" I shouted. "You call that happiness? You built my joy on a lie." He flinched. "I did it for you." "No," I said coldly. "You did it for yourself." Because it was easier to lie than to face my pain. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. Maybe he realized that whatever bond had kept us together was gone. That night I packed a bag and went to stay at a motel. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't walk through those rooms that suddenly felt haunted. Lila called me, her small voice breaking my heart. "Mama, when are you coming home?" I swallowed back tears. "Soon, sweetheart. I just need a little time." She hesitated. "Aunt Ellie came today." My blood froze. "What did she say?" "She said she loves me. She cried a lot. I don't know why." I couldn't speak. The tears I had held back all day finally spilled over. I wanted to tell her everything, but how do you tell a child her whole world is a lie? Days passed. I couldn't eat, couldn't think. I'd stare at the motel ceiling and replay every year of Lila's life, wondering if there had been signs I missed, tiny clues I was too blinded by love to see. One evening, as I sat in that dim room with the hum of the air conditioner as my only companion, I heard a knock on the door. When I opened it, Eleanor stood there, eyes swollen, hands trembling. She held a letter. "She needs to know," she whispered. I looked at the envelope, my stomach twisting. It was sealed in her handwriting, addressed to Lila. "What's in it?" I asked. "The truth," she said. I shook my head. "You can't. You'll ruin her." "She deserves to know who she is," Eleanor said through tears. "And you deserve to stop living in someone else's shadow." I wanted to burn that letter, to destroy every trace of this nightmare. But I took it from her hands and closed the door. That night, I stared at it for hours. One small envelope that could destroy everything or finally set it free. By morning, I knew what I had to do. The morning I decided to tell Leela, the world felt unnaturally still. Even the birds outside the motel window seemed to hush, as if they knew what was about to happen. The letter Eleanor had given me lay on the bedside table, taunting me with its quiet weight. I hadn't opened it yet. I couldn't. I wanted the truth to come from me, not from her. Not from the woman who had stolen my motherhood under the guise of mercy. I drove home just after dawn. The house looked smaller somehow, as though the lies inside had eaten away at its walls. When I stepped through the door, Lila ran to me, throwing her arms around my waist. I inhaled her scent shampoo, crayons, and childhood innocence, and my heart cracked all over again. "I missed you so much, Mama," she said, her voice muffled against my coat. I knelt down and cupped her face. "I missed you too, sweetheart, more than you'll ever know." Richard was in the kitchen, nursing his coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Our eyes met briefly, but no words passed between us. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't poison the air further. "Lila," I said softly, "can we go for a little drive? Just you and me." She nodded, curious. Within minutes, we were on the road, the sky overcast and heavy. I didn't have a destination in mind. I just needed space somewhere far enough from the ghosts that had taken residence in our home. We ended up at the lake, the one we used to visit when she was small. I parked by the old dock, the same spot where she once fed ducks from her tiny palms. The air smelled of damp earth and memories. She looked at me, confused but trusting. "Mama, why are we here?" I took a deep breath, my hands trembling, "because I need to tell you something important, something I should have known long ago." Her eyes widened slightly. "Are you and Daddy getting divorced?" The question sliced through me. "No, sweetheart, it's not about that. It's about you." She blinked. "Me?" "Yes." I reached into my bag and pulled out the photograph, the one that had shattered my world. "Do you remember Aunt Ellie?" "Of course," she said, smiling faintly. "She's my favorite aunt." I swallowed hard. "She loves you very much. Maybe more than anyone else in this world." Lila frowned. "Why are you saying that like it's sad?" Because the truth was heavier than either of us deserved." "Lila," I said, my voice trembling, "the day you were born, there was something I didn't know, something no one told me. The people I trusted the most, they lied to me." She tilted her head. "What do you mean?" I held her hand. "You're special, darling, but not in the way you think. You weren't born from me." Her hand froze, her lips parted, confusion flickering into disbelief. "What?" "I thought you were mine, sweetheart. I believed it with all my heart. But the truth is, Eleanor, your Aunt Ellie, she's your biological mother." For a moment, she just stared at me, her young face blank, as if her mind refused to understand the words. Then, slowly, her brows furrowed, her eyes glistened. "That's not true," she whispered. I reached for her, but she pulled away. "No, you're lying." "I wish I were," I said, tears spilling freely now. "I didn't know." "They kept it from me. I didn't find out until last week. I swear to you, Lila, I didn't know." She shook her head violently, covering her ears. "Stop it! You're my mom. You've always been my mom. I am your mom," I cried. "I may not have given birth to you, but I've loved you every second of your life. That's never going to change." She stood up, trembling, her eyes darting toward the lake as if searching for escape. "Why would Aunt Ellie... why would she? She thought she was helping," I said bitterly. "Your father and she, they made a choice without me. They thought they were saving me, but they destroyed us all." Lila's lips quivered. "So Daddy knew too?" I nodded, unable to speak. She looked like she'd been punched. "Everyone knew except you. And there it was, the truth out loud, ugly and raw. I wanted to take her pain away, to gather her into my arms and shield her from the cruelty of grown-up secrets. But how could I comfort her when I was the reason those lies had lived so long? She sank to her knees, sobbing. "Then who am I, Mama? Who am I supposed to be?" I knelt beside her and pulled her close despite her resistance. "You're my Lila. You're the girl I prayed for, the one I stayed up with when you had nightmares, the one whose birthday I never missed. You're the light in my life, no matter what anyone says." She didn't answer. She just cried against my shoulder until the wind carried her sobs across the water. When we got home, she ran straight to her room and slammed the door. I could hear her crying through the walls. Richard tried to speak, but I stopped him with a glare that could have burned through glass. "This is your doing," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You took a woman's womb, her love, her faith, and you made them all lies." He looked broken, but I didn't care. I walked past him and locked myself in the guest room. The house that once held laughter was now a tomb. Every corner felt haunted by betrayal. Lila stopped speaking to me for days. She'd leave for school in silence and come home only to shut herself away. I didn't blame her. The truth I gave her had ripped her identity apart. On the third night, I found the letter Eleanor had written still unopened on my nightstand. I tore it open with shaking hands. "My dearest Lila, if you're reading this, it means the truth has finally come to you. Please don't hate your mother. May has loved you more purely than anyone ever could. I never meant to steal that love from her. I thought I was saving her life. But I see now I only broke 3 hearts instead of 1. You are loved beyond measure by both of us. Please forgive me." "Eleanor," I folded the letter and pressed it to my chest. My tears soaked through the paper. For a brief, unbearable moment, I felt pity for her. Pity for a woman who had carried her child but lost her motherhood in a lie meant to heal. But pity didn't erase the wound. The next morning, Lila came out of her room, pale and hollow-eyed. She held the letter in her hand. "Aunt Ellie gave me one too," she said quietly. "I know everything now. I waited for anger, for screams. But instead," she whispered, "can I see her?" My heart clenched. "If that's what you want." She nodded. "I need to know what she's like as a mother." Those words cut me deeper than any blade could. That afternoon, I drove her to Eleanor's house. Neither of us spoke the whole way. The silence was thick with unspoken things, questions, guilt, fear. When Eleanor opened the door, her face lit up with tears. "Lila, and my daughter, no." Our daughter ran into her arms. I stood on the porch, watching. My heart felt both full and shattered. Love and loss intertwined so tightly I couldn't tell them apart. For the first time, I realized the cruelest truth of all sometimes. Love isn't enough to claim what was never truly yours. I sat in the car outside Eleanor's house for nearly an hour, watching through the rain-blurred windshield as Lila and my sister sat together in the front room. I could see their silhouettes, Eleanor brushing Lila's hair, Lila leaning in close, their movements soft and careful like 2 people trying to remember how to breathe the same air. I wanted to burst through the door and pull her back to me, To remind her that I was the one who stayed up through every fever, the one who kissed every scraped knee, the one who sang lullabies when nightmares came. But I couldn't move. My hands gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. When Lila finally stepped outside, dusk had fallen. Her eyes were swollen from crying, but her voice was calm, almost too calm. "She told me everything, Mama." I nodded, barely able to speak, and she said she never meant to take you away from me. She said you saved her life too. That last part hit me in a way I didn't expect. Saved her life? She said she was going to give me up to strangers. She said you begged her not to, that you promised to raise me with love. Lila looked down, twisting her hands. I believe her, Mama, but I believe you too. Tears stung my eyes. You don't have to choose between us, sweetheart. You never should have been put in that position. She nodded weakly, and we drove home in silence. The car was filled with the faint sound of the windshield wipers and the ache of words we couldn't say. When we reached the house, Richard was waiting at the door, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice unsteady. Lila brushed past him. "I just want to go to bed." He turned to me, but I didn't bother answering. I walked straight to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared at my reflection in the window. "You lied to me," I said quietly, "and now she's broken." "I know," he said behind me. "I know, May." "No, you don't," I whispered. "You'll never understand what it's like to look into your child's eyes and realize she belongs to someone else. You'll never know what it feels like to raise love built on a lie." He stepped closer, but I moved away. The distance between us had become a canyon. "I'm leaving tomorrow," I said. "I can't stay here anymore." He looked stunned. "Where will you go?" "Somewhere I can breathe." That night, I packed a suitcase. Lila didn't come out of her room, and I didn't expect her to. But around midnight, I heard the door creak. She stood in the doorway, pale and trembling. "Are you really going, Mama?" I nodded. "Just for a while." Her voice broke. "If you go, who am I supposed to be?" I crossed the room and held her. "You're my girl," I whispered. "Always. No matter what blood says, no matter what the world says. That's something no lie can take away." She clung to me until she fell asleep in my arms, just like she did when she was small. I laid her gently on the bed and kissed her forehead. In the morning, I left before sunrise. The road stretched out ahead like a wound that never healed. I drove to the coast, a quiet town where no one knew me, where the sea could drown out my thoughts. I rented a small cottage overlooking the cliffs. The air tasted like salt and distance. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. But peace doesn't last when the past still knows your name. 3 days later, a knock came at the door. When I opened it, Eleanor was there, her face pale, her eyes rimmed red. "May," she said softly, "we need to talk." I didn't want to let her in, but something in her expression made me step aside. She sat at the small wooden table, hands folded like a penitent. "She's angry," she said, "at both of us. She doesn't understand why love had to come with secrets. She shouldn't have to," I said flatly. Eleanor nodded. "I know. That's why I came. I can't carry this anymore." You need to know everything. I folded my arms. I already know enough. No, you don't, she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. You don't know what happened after she was born? I frowned. What are you talking about? Eleanor took a shaky breath. When I gave her to you, it wasn't just because of pity or fear. It was because I couldn't raise her. Not only financially, there were other reasons. Her voice trembled. Richard wasn't supposed to be her father. My blood ran cold. What? She looked down. The man I was seeing back then, he left me when he found out I was pregnant. I was desperate, May. Richard was the only one who stood by me. He said he'd fix everything, that you'd never have to know. He signed her birth papers himself. I let him. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the table. So all this time, even he didn't know for sure. He knew, she whispered. He just didn't care. He wanted to keep you from falling apart. He said we'd tell you one day, but then Lila turned 5, then 10, and it was too late. I felt dizzy, the floor swaying beneath me. You let me love a child built from 2 lies, I said hoarsely. One about her mother, another about her father. Eleanor sobbed. I didn't know what else to do. Every time I tried to tell you, you looked so happy. I couldn't take that from you. I turned away, staring out the window at the endless sea. The waves crashed against the rocks like the heartbeat of a world that no longer cared. You already did, I whispered. You took everything. She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. Go home, Eleanor. Tell her whatever you need to, but don't ever come here again. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. I'll respect that. Before she left, she said one last thing that lingered long after the door shut. You were the best mother she ever had, May. That's the only truth that still matters. When she was gone, I sank to the floor and wept until I couldn't breathe. Days turned into weeks. I didn't call Richard. I didn't call Lila. The silence became my penance, my punishment, my refuge. I spent my days walking the cliffs, my nights talking to the wind as if it could carry my apologies back home. One evening, as I watched the sunset bleed into the ocean, a familiar voice called my name. I turned, and there she was, Lila. She looked older, stronger somehow, her hair tousled by the wind. Mama, she said, her voice steady, I found you. My throat tightened. How did you? Aunt Ellie told me where you went. She said it was time I came myself. I wanted to speak, but tears stole my words. She stepped closer, holding out her hand. Can we start over? Not as who they said we were, but as who we choose to be. The sun dipped lower, casting gold light over her face, the same light I'd watched fall across her crib all those years ago. I took her hand, my heart breaking and mending all at once. Yes, my darling, I whispered, we can start over. For the first time in months, I believed it might be true. Lila stayed with me at the cottage for the next few weeks. At first, the silence between us felt like a ghost that refused to leave. She'd walk along the cliffs in the morning, while I sat by the window knitting or pretending to read, waiting for the sound of her footsteps on the gravel. Neither of us knew how to begin again, how to speak without reopening the wound that bound us together. Then one afternoon she returned from her walk with a small bundle of wildflowers. She set them in a chipped vase on the table and said quietly, "I used to draw flowers like these when I was little. You always said they looked like weeds." I smiled faintly. "That's because I didn't want you to pick everyone in the yard." She laughed, a soft, fragile laugh that cracked the air open. I hadn't heard that sound in months. That night we cooked dinner together. It felt awkward at first, me chopping vegetables, her stirring soup, both of us careful not to bump into each other. But when she spilled a bit of broth and started apologizing, I couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, Lila, do you remember the first time you tried to bake cookies?" Her cheeks flushed. "And burned them black." "Yeah. You said they could work as doorstops." We both laughed until tears filled our eyes. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and real was enough. Still, every night, after she went to bed, I'd sit outside on the porch and stare at the horizon, wondering if I'd ever truly earned her forgiveness or if I even deserved it. I thought of Eleanor often. I hadn't heard from her since the day she left my cottage. I imagined her sitting alone in that old farmhouse, haunted by her own choices. Sometimes I pitied her. Other times I hated her. One evening, the phone rang. It was Richard. His voice was faint, older somehow. "May," he said, "Eleanor's in the hospital." My chest tightened. "What happened?" "She collapsed. They say it's her heart." For a long moment I couldn't breathe. The image of her face that day on the cliffs flashed before me, tired, broken, trying to make peace. "Does Lila know?" "She's on her way," he said. "You should come too." I looked at Lila, who had come into the room, her eyes wide and frightened. "It's Aunt Ellie, isn't it?" I nodded. "Yes, sweetheart. We need to go." The drive to the city was long and heavy. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and endings. When we reached Eleanor's room, she looked impossibly small, her once bright hair now silver, her skin pale as paper. Lila rushed to her side, clutching her hand. "Aunt Ellie," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Please don't leave." Eleanor smiled faintly, her voice barely a breath. "Oh, my darling girl, I've been leaving for a long time." I stood at the foot of the bed, unable to move. She looked at me then, her eyes soft. "May," she whispered, "thank you for coming." I swallowed hard. "You didn't give me much choice." A weak laugh escaped her. "Still stubborn after all these years." Lila looked between us, desperate. "Please don't fight. Not now." Eleanor reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I have something to tell you, something I couldn't before." I froze. What else could there possibly be? Her eyes filled with tears. "You remember the night you lost your last baby, the one before Lila?" The words hit me like ice. "Of course I remember." Her lips trembled. "The doctors said she was stillborn, but she wasn't, May." My knees buckled. "What are you saying?" "She was alive for a few minutes. I was there. I held her." Eleanor's voice broke. "Richard begged them not to tell you. He said you wouldn't survive another loss. So they let me sign the papers. She was buried under my name. For a moment, the world went silent. I could hear only the sound of my own heartbeat, wild and uneven. "You're lying," I whispered. "You can't—" "She had your eyes," Eleanor said softly. "She looked just like you." I stumbled backward, shaking my head. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I don't want to die with any more secrets," she said, tears rolling down her temples. "I took one child from you, and I hid another. I thought I was saving you from pain, but I only created more. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My entire body went cold." Lila sat frozen, gripping Eleanor's hand. "I'm so sorry, May," she whispered again. "Please, forgive me. For the first time in my life, I saw my sister not as my betrayer, but as a frightened woman who'd spent her entire life trying and failing to make things right." I leaned forward and took her hand. "You destroyed me," I said softly, "but you also gave me something beautiful. I don't know if I can forgive you, but I can't hate you anymore." A faint smile touched her lips. "That's enough." And then, just like that, she was gone. Lila cried into my shoulder, trembling. I held her tight, whispering the same lullaby I used to sing when she was small. For a brief, surreal moment, it felt like the years had folded back, and we were just mother and daughter again, two souls, trying to survive the same grief. We buried Eleanor on a foggy morning, beside our parents' graves. There were no speeches, no grand gestures, just the three of us, me, Lila, and Richard, standing in silence as the wind carried away the last of the petals from her casket. After the ceremony, Lila placed a single white rose on the grave. "She wasn't perfect," she said quietly, "but she loved us both." "Yes," I whispered. "In her own way, she did." That night, back at the cottage, Lila curled up beside me on the sofa. "Do you ever think she meant well?" I sighed. "Sometimes meaning well can do the most harm. But maybe that's all she knew how to do." She looked at me then, her eyes glistening. "You know what's strange?" "What?" "She said I remind her of the baby you lost. That maybe that's why she gave me to you, because she thought it would heal you." I stared into the flickering firelight, realizing how twisted and tragic it all was, that the same woman who took one child had tried to replace her with another. "Maybe she was right," I said finally, my voice barely a whisper, "because even through all the pain, I can't imagine my life without you." Lila rested her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in years, I felt something close to peace, not because everything was fixed, but because the truth had finally stopped hiding. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain and forgiveness, and somewhere deep inside me, I heard Eleanor's voice, faint as the sea breeze. "She was always yours, May. Always." It's been 12 years since Eleanor's funeral, and yet some mornings I still wake up expecting the phone to ring with her voice on the other end, soft, guilty, pretending to ask about the weather, when what she really wanted was forgiveness. Time has softened the sharp edges of her betrayal, but it hasn't erased them. You learn to live with certain wounds. You just stop expecting them to heal completely. Lila is grown now, 22. She lives in the city, studying psychology. She says she wants to understand why people do the things they do. Every time she says that, I feel both pride and sadness, because she's really trying to understand us, to understand the mess we handed her. But she visits every month, bringing flowers and stories, filling this quiet cottage with laughter again. When she comes through the door now, she doesn't hesitate before calling me Mom. That word still warms me to my bones. There was a time I thought I'd lost it forever. Today, she sits by the window, flipping through an old photo album. The same one that once held the photograph that shattered everything. I'd burned that picture years ago, but the album remained our life between those pages, captured before truth tore through it. Mom, she says softly, running a finger over a picture of us at the lake. Do you ever wish you hadn't found out? That you could have just kept living the lie? I take a deep breath, watching the waves crash beyond the glass. Sometimes, yes, but lies have a way of aging badly. They rot everything they touch. She nods. Still, it changed everything. It did, I admit. But maybe that's what life does. It keeps breaking until you find the pieces that still matter. She leans her head against my shoulder. You know, I used to think being born into lies meant I was cursed, but now I think it made me strong. Because even though everything fell apart, you never stopped loving me. I smile, tears gathering. That's because love isn't something you turn off, Lila. It's not about birth certificates or bloodlines. It's about every choice you make to stay when leaving would be easier. She smiles back, and for a moment, I see the little girl who once clung to my hand at the lake, afraid of the water, only now she's the one steadying me. Later that evening, we walk down to the shore. The sky is painted gold and violet, the sea breathing softly like an old friend. We stand where the waves lick the rocks, the same place where my old life began to unravel all those years ago. Lila picks up a small seashell and presses it into my palm. Keep it, she says, for every time you think love wasn't enough. I hold it tight, feeling its rough edges. You're wiser than I ever was at your age. She laughs. That's because I had a complicated teacher. We sit on a weathered bench overlooking the cliffs. The wind carries the scent of salt and lilac, the same flowers she brought to Eleanor's grave last spring. I went to see her last month, Lila says suddenly. I turn to her. Eleanor? She nods. I wanted to tell her I forgive her, and to thank her for giving me you. My heart squeezes. What did you say? I told her she was wrong, Lila says, eyes glistening. That she thought love was something you could trade or borrow. But it's not. It's something you earn, and you earned it, Mom. Every day of my life, I look out at the horizon, unable to speak. The sea blurs through my tears. After a while, she says quietly, "There's one more thing. I found out who my biological father was. The air shifts, my pulse quickens. How?" I looked through old records, Aunt Ellie's journals. His name was Thomas Ward. He died before I was born. I exhale, a strange relief washing over me. Then you'll never have to face the kind of lies we did. She smiles sadly. No, but I did find out something else. He was a painter. There's a gallery downtown that still shows his work. I saw one piece. It was called Child of the Storm. The name sends a shiver through me. It was a painting of a baby wrapped in a pink blanket, she continues. The same kind you told me I was wrapped in when you brought me home. For a moment, neither of us speaks. The wind picks up, whipping her hair across her face. He never knew me, she says, but it's like he painted me anyway. I squeeze her hand. Maybe some things find us even when they're lost. We sit there until the sun sinks beneath the sea, silence filling the spaces words can't reach. When we finally stand to leave, she looks back one last time at the water and whispers, "I'm glad you're my mother." And I realize it's not about who gave birth to her, or who lied, or who kept the secret. It's about the years we survived together, the nights she slept curled in my arms, the laughter that managed to come back even after everything burned down. Back at the cottage, she helps me hang new curtains. The place smells of fresh bread and ocean air. When she leaves the next morning, I watch her car disappear down the winding road until it's just a blur of silver against the green. The quiet that follows is gentle, not lonely. I make tea and sit by the window, the seashell still in my hand. The light catches its surface, and for a moment I think I see Eleanor's reflection in the glass, smiling, young again, her eyes free of guilt. "Rest now, Ellie," I whisper. "We've all finally made peace." Outside, the sea hums like a lullaby. I close my eyes and think of that first moment when I held Lila as a baby, believing she was mine. In a way, I was right all along, because motherhood isn't just about birth. It's about becoming. It's in the sleepless nights, the scraped knees, the quiet forgiveness after storms. It's in the promise you make and keep, even when everything else falls apart. And as I sit here in the fading light, the waves whispering against the shore, I know this truth at last. The child I raised was never mine, but she became mine in every way that mattered, and that, after